Hey Patrick, so practical nerds, I guess. Um, got a few good questions, I guess, and yeah, you're able to also put together quite a few questions from some of our readers. I think there's some good points or questions on AI which we could talk about. That'll be nice to get into. Um, Craziest business we saw this week. I'm sure that'll be a fun conversation.
Hmm.
And I think I see landscapes, market maps, and top 50, 100 lists. I'm sure that's one you'd like to get into. Yeah,
I'm currently working on that. Yeah.
nice. Any preference between the three? Which one we dig into first? So the choice between AI, craziest business we saw, and our opinion on market landscapes, maps, and lists.
Okay. Mm. Well, let's start with craziest business. Maybe that's something that we can do every week. I don't know. Let's try it.
Let's go for it.
Should I go first?
Yeah.
I'm actually just going live through the deal flow list from this week. So I'm spotting this a little bit on the fly here.
Uh-huh.
Um, I mean, there was two companies, if I can go to two companies that I really like, but one of them I think is quite a moonshot. So if I define crazy as moonshot, so it's a company that has developed a laser welding technology that, if it works out, could really revolutionize how much material you need. Sorry, this is about metal, by the way. So welding metal, how much material you need to come to very high integrity, high structural load
Mm-hmm.
structures. So I like that quite a bit. That's a founder I really like, and it's quite early, which is something I like out of Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then technologically, it's a real moonshot. So
Okay.
quite like that one.
Interesting.
In my customer calls and market reference calls, still have a few questions about, for example, how you can do it overhead without any basically structure underneath while you're welding.
Okay.
So a bit of a, you know, question mark there, lots of technical challenge. But yeah, it's one of the bigger moonshots. How about you?
That sounds pretty cool, actually. I'm going to change the interpretation of, I guess, of what could count as craziness in a business. So I met with a company where, get this, the annualized net profit rate, right, is about the same as the total amount of funding they've raised so far, right? And so just put that into perspective. So for me, especially
And,
given,
and and the firm is 30 years old, or
no, actually less than a tenth of that. So, so
it's
So quite a young company, and I wouldn't say what they're doing is crazy in the sense of the word that VCs tend to use, but I'd say crazy in the sense of what the financials seem to suggest, especially I think in the current landscape, quite out there in terms of how the business profile stacks up.
what's the rough space that they're in and the model that they're doing?
Um, So let me go with skilling as a broad theme. So I don't want to be too specific here because I think it could lead to, I think the firm getting called out, maybe in a unplanned way, I
We don't
guess.
want that.
Let's just go with skilling. It broadly operates in the skilling space.
Okay, and the model they're doing?
So let's say they're solving for the opportunity for uh, trying to create a model where, on one hand, you have serious shortage of skilled workforce in certain kinds of trades and opportunities, and on the other hand, there's a surplus of people who are very aspirational in nature, want to explore what other alternatives exist out there in the job market. And this platform is sort of bridging the two sides with a very unique take on skilling, some proprietary aspects, some aspects which might not be proprietary, but maybe make them relevant for an altogether new job and labor market for today's times.
Got it. I'd seen in Europe, um, uh, I think a number of models I mean, last year for sure, but I think even more so in the last 3 months. So there was a company that I really liked out of Germany that is going so into climate jobs, electrician,
Mhm.
plumber for
Yeah.
for like green jobs, and pre-seed team, really good founding team that I liked.
Hmm.
Um, and their full stack model would be that basically they source workers. For example, one target pool that they would do is migrant workers. So
Okay.
people who have either recently come to Germany or are about to come to Germany,
Mm-hmm.
or France for that matter, works the same way. And then they would upskill them, would deeply verticalize what these people do in the initial days. So they wouldn't train them like horizontally on a lot of different tasks and on for like generic problem solving skills like you would do
Yeah.
in the, master trades, but
Mm-hmm.
more like, okay, this is the job you're going to do the next 3 months. Here's the training we're giving you with a software-led approach, um, and then put them on job with key accounts in the climate space. So rather than having like a huge amount of demand side, having more like nationwide key accounts. That's the thesis of the team.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I like that one. And then there was another one that I saw, and quite looked at, which I found interesting, which was really like targeted towards Gen Zs and how you can excite Gen Zs about getting into trades jobs, again, electricians, plumbers, um, and would sort of pre-qualify them through like online surveys. Almost think of it like Typeform, um,
Okay.
led courses for a couple hours. And then if someone goes through all of that at the very end, um, you would know that they are motivated and they have acquired some basic skills, but really what you're judging is that they are motivated. And then you would basically refer them to, again, like large employers that are hiring. Think of it like oil and gas companies that were to hire engineering ops type people,
Mm-hmm.
um, and make money on that. So those are two models that I've recently quite liked. In Europe, didn't pull the trigger on both of them, but there was lots to like there. So it sounds like you're seeing something similar.
I mean, the thing is, and I was having this discussion earlier today with someone. It's quite incredible if we zoom out a bit. In all major economies that we see today, something related to either jobs or workforce availability is one of the top two or three important agendas at a national level that is addressed to the political leadership and so
Right.
on. So for example, if you go to the west, it's about the aging workforce, it's about bringing manufacturing back home, etc., and preparing the workforce for this new shift. In Europe, of course, as we are very well aware, there's a dramatic shortage, and I think the shortage is only intensifying for blue collar work.
Right.
And over in other markets with a labor surplus, like in India and quite a few other emerging markets, there's this talk that the job creation is not in line with the rate of economic growth, and therefore more needs to be done to facilitate job creation.
Oh, I
If
mean, just look at China. I mean, they have 20% unemployment among the young generation. I
Yeah,
mean, it's only now getting talked about, but actually, if you're within China, that has been a problem for a long time. And so
yeah,
what people in China will tell you is that, hey, actually, this generation feels like completely lost. If you have a job that demand like crazy hours of you, there's no
mhm,
promotion opportunities whatsoever because there's so
yeah,
much unemployment and employers could just pick from the streets.
yeah.
Um, and so that means they're creating this lost generation that gets no experience, that gets no upskilling. And you have 1.4 billion people, like 20% of any slice of that population.
It's an
That
enormous.
that's a large population to be
Yeah,
unhappy.
yeah. Yeah, I think, the more we zoom out, I think we're coming at like an incredible convergence where uh, all these themes of surpluses and shortages seem to, I think, suggest there needs to be a reimagination of how we think of skilling, workforce creation. Seems like a lot in the blue collar trades, but perhaps even in the white collar, maybe. And I think because construction happens to be the biggest beneficiary, so
Mhm.
much in the design and the build phase as well. I think it's a tremendous time
There,
for those
there's
trades.
one that we're about to invest in. It's a European firm in the payroll space, actually, for blue collar, pink
Mhm.
collar, potentially also white collar. And so what I like about that, and so we're concluding the investment probably next month, next week or two. And so what I like about that firm is, so in Europe, we have in a few countries in the healthcare system, um, what the countries would call the electronic patient record, which
Mhm.
in the healthcare system, I mean, you will know this from India much more. It's a much more digitized economy, but over here, and Nordics were the first ones, but like countries like Germany are only now getting it, is that the patient would actually have like a centralized record that the patient owns. And
Yeah.
every doctor, when you're going to a doctor, to a hospital to get a treatment, you could grant them access. They could write whatever, the diagnosis was, etc., into your centralized patient record, and it gets stored and you can share it with whoever you want. So this payroll company is building what I call the electronic employment record. So they're
Hmm.
actually allowing an employee that is roaming around, that is churning out of employers very often, to store the payroll data, the whole working history, to share data with prospective new employers. I quite like that space as well. That was the first of its kind that I saw, but I really
That's,
liked it.
yeah, that sounds very cool.
Yeah, let's see. Right. Sorry, what was the next question on the list that we could talk about?
So we have a choice of either talking about AI and I guess wrapping it in a vertical context, or let's see here, personal opinion on. So okay, there's actually a few more questions as well. Let's see if I can think of those more. So personal opinion on VCs posting landscapes, market maps, and top 50, 100 lists. About payments from developers to subcontractors in the US. And do we think the AEC technology venture market is thawing?
Ah, hey, why don't we pick that one? If the market is slowing, what do you think?
I'm not so sure, to be honest. I think the market is thawing just a tiny bit on the early stage side. And what I would call early is up to, let's say, Series A. I think that has thawed a bit. I think the growth market, so it's probably not the most frigid it has been, but I don't think it's thawed just yet, if you know what I mean.
But
I
I
think,
am, I am, I am starting to see more and more also larger rounds coming back and getting put together. Which, I mean, you couldn't say that for the last year. That there was
yeah,
nothing happening.
I would agree with that. I think uh, we had definitely hit a phase around mid or late last year where it seemed like nothing would move. Like regardless of what assets were out there, what the quality was, what price, nothing would move.
Mm.
It feels like we're past that now. It still uh, seems very much very liquid compared to what at least I would consider to be an equilibrium, but it is moving just a little bit faster now. I get
I,
the feeling.
there's one fascinating thing that I was talking about with a few investor friends here in Europe recently. I mean, separately with each one of them.
Hmm.
Um, so I have a feeling that let me actually back up. So historically, most founders and VCs would have told you in the past, all the craziest valuations get paid in the US. And
Yeah,
certainly, like I think there have been years that was 100% the case. 2021 was just nuts for everyone, as I think you and I know.
yeah.
Um, so all of a sudden, these past few, I guess, 8 weeks maybe,
Mhm.
I've been telling a few friends, hey, I have the feeling that in Europe right now there's crazy shit happening. Like there's deals that two founders, a deck, 25 pre.
Wow.
I mean, huh? And by the way, I mean for
I guess just to
comparison,
just to clarify, you mean 25 million pre?
25 million euro pre money. Like
Yeah,
like, of course you can always say like, okay, for everything there's an outlier.
yeah,
Um, and that specific deal that I'm thinking of is an outlier, but the general trend, there were other deals that, even at nothing there except two founders, and it's happening at whatever, 10, 12 million pre-money.
yeah,
In the current market, that's crazy. And in the
yeah.
US, you can get half that at the moment.
Hmm. Yeah, I think my observation also has been, at least more from the emerging markets or Asia and Africa side of things. There's obviously outliers where we still see, pure pre-seed deals, as I would call them. Just let's say one founder or a pair of founders, and maybe a little bit more than an idea. Still deals happening at what I would consider very expensive valuations for pre-seed. But all in
And
all,
what,
I would
what, what what's expensive for pre-seed in Asia?
ah. So the reference has kept increasing. If you'd asked me this question 3, 4 years ago, I would have probably said $5 million is expensive,
Yeah.
right? And maybe I would say it's still above median for sure, for a pre-seed for sure, right? But there are a few deals happening at upwards of $10 million, which at least I would consider quite expensive for a pre-seed round.
Yeah, I would have said the same for Europe. But then right now, I just have this feeling, I don't know, some investors seem to do some 2021 stuff again in that area.
Yeah.
I have no
Yeah.
idea why. I mean, do you ever, let's say I'm right about that. Like, do you ever have a thesis why?
So I have a feeling it could be a combination of two or three factors at play. I think because the overall activity, so and this of course is typical for what I'm describing is maybe true for most investors, not so much at a few, and I think I would like to believe not so true at Fundamental, but with a lot of other investors, the overall investment activity has throttled down to such an extent,
Right.
right? If they've built up conviction in one or two, or let's say a handful of opportunities, I think it makes the aspect that they might have to lose the deal unless they pony up the big valuation.
Hmm.
It amplifies the pressure. That's my feeling.
So sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. So it's an artificially created supply shortage.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, what I haven't done as an exercise is whether it actually, like the anecdotes that I've been sharing with my buddies, whether they correlate with, oh, these firms who paid that or who went all out, whether they had new funds. I mean, oftentimes at the beginning of a fund cycle, you see some really,
Yeah.
like deployment pressure. And I haven't done that exercise. I don't know if that's the case. My gut feeling would be no, but I also haven't done the work on that. But it's fascinating because historically, you would always like US investors would come to Europe to actually get value deals.
Uh-huh.
And right now, I'm really glad that we have Adam doing US deals for us. I can tell you that.
Do you
Um,
think, just piggybacking off of what you're saying, do you think that could have in the near or maybe not a little bit further out, the impact that actually causes like a backlash wherein US investors end up retreating in a cyclical manner, where they say, oh, you know what, now it's actually at parity or maybe even more expensive than good US deals. So let's just take a break here and come back when it's cheaper.
I mean, if the trend were to continue through an A and B round in Europe as well, that we would see crazy valuations, then I could absolutely see that. I mean, but by the way, I mean, US investors in the last year have been significantly less active in Europe than they have been the year before.
I see.
But they haven't retreated from the continent. It was just less active, but they have been less active also in their home country.
Hmm.
But if this trend were to persist also in the following rounds, yeah, I could see that. If it's just in the pre-seed and seed round, it probably wouldn't impact them as much because those rounds are not done by US investors. I mean, they
Yeah.
would typically like to see a little bit more and have also some active involvement from local investors that they can trust and like to work with. So I actually think for them it might rather work out really nicely because someone else earlier actually is the sucker that paid too much. So
Ah,
I don't
I
know.
hear you.
Well, we'll see, I
And I
guess.
think there's this expression that goes around, and it's fascinating that that expression, we periodically forget that expression, then remember it again, then forget it again. This term called tourist investors, right? Maybe they're on holiday, or maybe the holiday is gone now, and I guess the next holiday season to commence for them to be on holiday again.
Yeah,
Uh,
it could be. It
tourist
could
experience.
be. But it's so important though that whenever you raise capital, regardless at what round, that you make it work for everyone. If one side fleeces the other, I mean, it works the same way if you pay just too cheap. I've seen a company in the UK recently
Mhm.
where actually two of them in the last 5 months, where angel investors and a small pre-seed fund in one case
Mhm.
um, got the company to sell them equity at 2.5 million post on the first round.
Okay.
That's just you're giving away way too much, and that's the
Yeah.
other side fleecing each other. And so I've always felt like it's so important to have rounds where everybody walks away feeling as and sometimes everyone feels as a winner, sometimes everyone feels it's like a fair deal, but what
Mhm.
you're getting is a situation in which everyone sits in the boat, rows in the same direction,
Mhm.
pulls their weight towards, hey, we know what we can get at the next round. We know what we can potentially shoot for at exit. I think that's another thing to really keep in mind. It's not
Yeah.
round by round. It's like, long-term exit. But if you're making the founders really feeling fleeced, or if you're making an investor really feeling fleeced, it never leads to this we're sitting in the same boat situation. I think that's so detrimental. So if
Yeah.
you're doing like a 25 million pre-money, I actually think that's very detrimental for the founder in that case. And vice
Yeah.
versa, if you're doing a 2.5 million
Yeah.
post, it's also detrimental to the investor.
Yeah. I think one aspect that I think we as investors need to remind ourselves, and I think founders quite often don't realize what actually, when we set valuations, what that actually means, right? So I think quite often it's perceived as, hey, you get so and so amount of money against a certain amount of dilution. What I think is not appreciated as much, or it's usually realized much later at the cost of everyone involved, is every valuation ultimately bakes in expectations.
Yeah.
Uh, the moment you accept a fairer, or what I would describe as a median valuation, that means you are answerable to a median standard of expectations. If you accept a very high valuation, or that's where you draw the line, you've signed yourself up to extraordinary expectations. And I think history shows that extraordinary expectations it's extraordinarily rare that they'll be
Mm.
fulfilled. Uh, so I think that's something which, again, we seem to always have cyclical amnesia about, and I think it's a cautious reminder to all of us, including us investors, that whatever we pay for, it's a measure of our expectations.
It's very true. What's the craziest valuation you have seen in 2023 in like the emerging markets?
At what stage?
Pick one.
Hmm. I think at a pre-seed level, something in the ballpark of 20 to 30 million.
Three.
Yeah.
And was there something there? Or was it founders and a deck? Founders
I
and a
mean,
deck.
obviously the founders were there, which is why the
Yeah.
number existed. So, but not too much more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, but you know, I find that interesting also in the context of, I think last year there were a lot of alarmist voices.
Hmm.
And like, I mean, whenever you go on social, right, everything is always extreme. Oh, I have the greatest firm ever, or I'm the greatest founder ever, I'm the greatest VC ever.
Hmm.
And oh, now, you know, the house of cards is coming crashing down. That was
Yeah.
2021, right? And so
Yeah.
alarmist. I mean, what you're seeing is actually that there's a lot of money that folks have been sitting around. And by the way, there's still funds raising money. It's just that the first time fund managers have a harder time that they had 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So, but there's still money being raised. It's just more concentrated,
Yeah.
and that money does get deployed.
That is, I guess, as good a tie-in as we can get to a discussion on AI.
Oh wow,
How
yeah,
about that? Let's take a stab at AI then.
wow. Are you setting me up for a rant?
If that's what you want to do, I will not stand in your way, good sir.
Okay, let me share an anecdote that I actually brought into this conversation today that I found interesting. So get this.
Hmm.
Um, I had a chat with a buddy of mine this week,
Hmm.
and um, this was about, hey, you know, vertical SaaS investor that is famous for and you know, great track record, that is famous and successful in investing in vertical software for
Hmm.
a long time. Now looking into new spaces, and the spaces mentioned were, oh, now we're looking into robotics, and now we're looking into space technology.
Okay.
And my reaction to that, and I'd be curious to hear yours, and then I'll tell you how that ties into vertical AI. So my reaction was twofold. One, those are great spaces. I mean,
Hmm.
space tech is not something for that you and I do with fundamental. That's
Yeah.
unless someone tells me, hey, I have a construction robotics company for the moon, then I'll for sure take a look.
Yeah.
um, I think a very, very promising space with, pun intended, with long-term potential. Robotics is one that I also love. We are actually actively investing in that. I've
Indeed.
done in the last um, yeah, in the last 12 months, I've done one out of Amsterdam that has massive potential.
Hmm.
So as the sectors, I really like that. But what I found odd is that this investor that has historically done very, very well with vertical software is now saying, let me hold off on that. And I'm going to
Mhm.
look into these spaces that are like as far from my core competence as they could be.
Yeah.
So, what do you make of this?
I mean, I must admit I'm completely bamboozled by this. Seems, at least to my simple mind, a very random detour. Because I would imagine vertical software or SaaS to space tech and robotics. Look, again, it is possible that the same investor, same sort of investors, pick great companies, which is ultimately what our job is, pick great companies across these themes. But if you were to ask me, the competence doesn't seem to be directly transferable. So it does seem, I don't know, seems a bit odd.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the go-to-market motions don't transfer at all. Like the
Yeah.
competent, one of the things that vertical SaaS investors tend to be like take Redstone, sorry, not Redstone, Redpoint in the US.
Hmm.
Um, so I haven't been, my anecdote was not about Redpoint, so I can use Redpoint now as an example. Redpoint, terrific vertical SaaS track record. Like, I mean, one of the very best worldwide. But one of the things that they really are great at with their firms and their founders, from my knowledge, is they're great at telling them how to go to market about it, like how to
Yeah.
build your sales team, how to build your CSM team, how to do the pricing, etc. None of those transfer into how you do robotics or space tech. Zero.
Yeah. Very true.
So my thesis for why this investor is doing this and holding off a little, or I don't know if they hold off, they didn't say it that way, but why they are holding back a little on vertical SaaS and looking into this is because they're afraid of AI.
Hmm.
And so here's my rant. I think that's bullshit. I
Hmm.
think that's bullshit. So if you're think about it this way, right? Um, when Facebook open sourced React
Okay.
as a framework to develop mobile apps, who in the world came out and said, hey, let's stop for a second, okay? Now software, vertical software is really screwed because now even Shub can build an application at
Uh-huh.
home for vertical mobile software. So we better see if that is not completely disrupting anyone else building a software product.
Yeah.
That's the analogy. It's completely foolish. And so these people, I think, so it's okay to hold off in the sense that I don't know what is happening yet, and I want to see a little bit.
Hmm.
But I think the fear or the anxiety that AI will take over and open AI will disrupt everything
Hmm.
is for the same reason React did not disrupt everything, just foolish. It's an enabler for someone else to use that super horizontal technology and
Hmm.
wrap it into a vertical product. And the,
Hmm.
the reason for that is twofold. One, everything needs context.
Hmm.
And two, especially in B2B applications, you need data to actually train those models. And that
Hmm.
data, in 80, 90% of the cases, sits behind someone's corporate firewall.
Yeah. Very
So I
true.
can use OpenAI to disrupt consumer applications. I get that. That's what everyone is like showing me on my LinkedIn feed, like how awesome it is to write an article with it. Sure, because it got trained on open data. But
Yeah.
try to do the same thing on how to do mechanical engineering and
Hmm.
plumbing calculations in 3D models
Yeah.
for a construction firm. Try to open source train your model on that. Good luck. So context and wrapping it with verticalized data that sits behind firewalls. That's my reason why I think that's a completely foolish thing to hold off on vertical
Hmm.
software.
Nice.
That was my rant. Sorry.
I have a different take, not to yours, as in the way I look at companies which present AI as the cornerstone of what they represent. Uh, and here I think it's very important, and quite often I think I would call it a fallacy where the the underlying technology or innovation and a company are seen as being one and the same thing. or more or less the same thing. So let me
Hmm.
illustrate what I'm trying to say. So if you go back 100 years, one of the most groundbreaking things that happened in human history at the time was car manufacturing or automakers became accessible to the mass public.
Right.
And that dramatically transformed global economy in terms of GDP output, how much we could move, how fast things could get done, how productive people became, right? That led to a whole host of car makers suddenly getting established, a lot of them going public, setting up shares, etc. Of those, how many exist today? An extremely tiny fraction, right? If I had to make a guess, maybe low single digits. I don't know if it's even lower than that.
Hmm.
If you fast forward to, let's say, end of the Second World War, right? Commercial airlines becoming accessible to the public, that again was transformative, right? It was a tremendous thing to happen technologically to humankind. Just imagine if they didn't exist today, right?
Hmm.
How much less we would get done.
Hmm.
Uh, but hey, how many of the airlines which started then are around today? Again, a very tiny fraction. And I think if we start a debate on how good those businesses are, that's another debate to have altogether.
Indeed.
If we go to the 80s and 90s, right, there were tons of firms which were PC manufacturers, right? And at that time, it was seen as this tremendous innovation which will transform humankind. And the cool thing is, it did transform humankind, right? But how many of those exist today, right? Fast forward to the dot-com era, right? People said e-commerce will change us. And the cool thing is it did,
Yeah,
right?
and B2C it did. I mean, I have a slightly, we can
Yeah,
talk about
okay. So
B2B
let's
there.
let let me nuance that then, right? So B2C e-commerce, the argument was it will change it, and it did.
Hmm.
But that was literally in the Western world or in most of the world, that's Amazon. Everyone else just died out from that
Hmm.
era, right? So, and I think if we capture the essence of the winning companies, they didn't win because, so for instance, Amazon didn't win because it was an e-commerce company, right? If you pick your favorite car maker, they didn't win because they were a car maker, right? Or if you pick your favorite, um, I mean, Apple may not be an appropriate example here, but if you pick your favorite laptop or computer manufacturer, they didn't win just because they happen to be a computer manufacturer. They
Hmm.
happen to do many other things which made them a great business. And I think that is where sometimes people get a bit carried away. Do I think AI will ultimately have a big role to play? Yes, for
Oh, I
sure.
agree too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But I
Yep.
think when people extrapolate it to the extent of saying AI is the cornerstone of the business, and because we're moving towards an AI world, we'll win. At that point, I really find myself um, having to distance myself from what the discussion is going towards,
Yeah.
because I think then the business doesn't need to be the same as the technology. In fact, history says it usually never is.
So let me reciprocate with a history lesson of my own, and
Mhm.
maybe we should. Yeah, it's really good history nerds here. So I was thinking the other day, what's the last truly, like in the true sense of the word,
Mhm.
disruptive technology uh, that was brought upon us? Not blockchain or Web3, not IoT, although it was highly hailed at some point. Um, it was the internet.
Mhm.
I mean, started in the 60s, became mass available early
Yeah.
90s. And so when you draw that comparison, and people say, including us, AI could have the same, if not bigger, transformative impact on business and humankind. Fair enough. I agree that there is probably the first in, since the internet, most transformative technology potential. Fair
Yeah.
enough. But when you think about the internet, what it changed was consumer applications for the first 25, 30 years. I'm not
Mhm.
saying it didn't have an impact on B2B. It did, but it was actually not disruptive in
Yeah.
many B2B sectors until quite late. And there's
Mhm.
still a number of B2B sectors where the internet has not led to
Yeah.
any disruption.
I would
Think
agree.
of oil and gas,
Mhm.
okay, just to give folks an example. And so the reason is that where information is publicly available and can be publicly connected, and you then reduce the incremental effort to build something out of that, think WordPress, think
Mm-hmm.
Shopify to actually build a shop, right?
Yeah.
And you connect that information that is already in the public domain, boom, you have a combustible mix. That's
Mm-hmm.
AI. That's open AI. But
Yeah.
what and Samsung actually I think 2-3 weeks ago released a statement that they said, hey, we actually ban any generative AI models from being applied in Samsung until we have figured that out.
Mm-hmm.
Now go to Sam Altman and tell him, hey, Sam, what is AI going to do with Samsung's business? Of course, he will tell you like his grand visions, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
I'm just pointing out the reality when you need context and you need data behind a firewall.
Yeah.
This is not the first place where AI will have an impact. And that's why I'm saying verticalized software using AI, wrapping it into a product. In my opinion, it's the same thing as it was a year ago or 2 years ago. It's just an additional
Yeah.
technology to have in the quiver. Now, sorry, just final point, Shub. So if I'm a founder that is building a vertical software without AI elements,
Mm-hmm.
that's a problem. So
Yeah.
that I think is going to get penalized, but also outcompeted by someone who's building the same product but using very strong AI. So in that sense, that competition is certainly there. But to say I'm not investing in vertical software at all at the moment,
Yeah.
I don't know. That seems to me like overreaction.
Yeah. I would have to agree with that. All right. I think we're going a bit over time. So maybe how about we conclude? Uh, Not sure in the most appropriate way, but with some thoughts on market participants throwing out landscapes, market maps, right? Top 50 lists or n number of lists, etc. What do you think about that, Patrick? Let's
I
hear
mean,
you.
I saw one the other day and I was thinking, I mean, let's actually back test this. Like every month or so, let's talk about us, right? So you and I were investing in four sectors: design technology, construction technology, renovation technology, and logistics technology. And you feel like every month someone is putting out, by someone I mean an investor or a journalist. An
Uh-huh.
investor or journalist is putting out like a market landscape or like a, hey, these are the 31 hottest construction tech startups in 2023. It really
Yeah.
feels like that. And so I want to do some back testing on that, going back, whatever, to 2016, 17, 18,
Uh-huh.
what kind of pieces folks put out there, and then actually backtest that with, hey, the companies that showed up there and that these people predicted to
Yeah.
be exciting and hot and great and transformative, where did they actually end up? I want to do that back testing and see how that works.
I mean, I'll be very interested in the results of what you find. I mean, I haven't done the study myself. I suspect it'll be a bit of a graveyard. That's what it'll look like.
Okay, I'll do the work on since we're so great at artwork, also for practical nerds. I maybe have to do something with tombstones then.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I mean, look, what do I tell you? I mean, from my vantage point, I think for the most part, as long as people treat it as, and by people I mean founders and investors, treat it as one event, which is not of great consequence, I think at that point it is all right. Uh, no damage caused. I think where it gets very damaging is when people use that, or I should be more specific, founders and investors treat that as validation or evidence of product market fit
Yeah,
and get ahead of themselves.
yeah,
And I think in the worst cases, it can just lead to quite a dramatic implosion, um, where you're almost, and I apologize for using this word.
oh,
If you believe too seriously in such lists, you may end up gaslighting yourself.
I mean, I've seen such instances. I can remember such. In
Yeah.
fact, I would say let's do that workshop, and I would even put out the hunch that out of the five like financially best performing companies in our portfolio, none of them was ever on a market map in the first 3 or 4 years of their lifetime. My hunch is that.
I think you might be right. I think you might be right.
So let's do the work. But if that thesis were true, what that would tell me is that so there's the gaslighting element, the fooling element that you mentioned. But it's also I mean, um, especially when you're a very young firm, right? And you are striving for attention I mean, the only real attention you should ever strive for is two people,
Mhm.
customer and talent. That's the
Yeah.
only people you should ever strive for attention for. Forget investors. They will come to you anyway because it's their fucking job. But I can understand why in that situation, in the very early days, you have maybe no name, no network, whatever. Getting attention might be good for your business. So let's carve that out. I
Fair.
understand that specific situation, but I think not everyone, not every founder, investor, whatever, is thinking about it that way. So most people just like to be like shined upon and have light and feel
Fair.
validation. So the problem with that might be you might not even know in what company you are on the list because you don't have the insider information, how the other people that you're lumped together with on that list, how they are actually performing. How are the reference checks going on those other
Mhm.
founders? Have they some
Yeah.
bodies in the closet in the
Yeah.
past? And so you are now being lumped together with other people and their past and their performance you are not aware of. And so customers who are aware of that, investors who are aware of that, they will take notice. They
Mhm.
will actually see you in the same company, and it might not be the win that you're hoping for. It might actually be detrimental, and you never know of it, and you never have an idea why actually that is not a good thing. So I'll work on that and see if the thesis is right.
I'll be super interested in what you find. And I think it'll be, I mean, I don't know to what extent it'll be in a form which we can share with the outside world or even a subset of the outside world. I think it might be very sobering what we find.
I'll make an ACVC post out of it.
Okay. Nice. That'll be something to stay tuned for.
Amazing. Hey, look, I mean, we're doing this for the first time, Shub. I wonder what's on your docket for the next week?
Docket for the next week,
Yeah, anything to look forward to next week on your calendar?
other than talking to you mean?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Hopefully your life is better.
I think there's a few interesting. I mean, I'd like to believe it is better, but you tell me, I guess. So I think there's a few very interesting opportunities that I'm quite excited about. I think alluding to some of the things I said about the opportunity for solving the work crisis, opportunity, employment crisis, skilling crisis, etc. And a couple of supply chain related opportunities that I really think are quite interesting. So really very keen to really dig into them.
Nice.
Yeah. So what are you looking forward to for next week?
I'm just looking at my calendar so next week I'm meeting a super talented founder, Gregor from Appear, that's Appear.space. It's a company that I recently invested in like 2, 3 months ago. And he's
Mhm.
building the Figma for XR prototyping. So basically like
Okay.
the standard design software. So I'm gonna have a meeting with him and with Seb, our colleague, on go-to-market pricing, targets, etc. And Gregor is super talented. So really, I have to say, looking at my calendar, like that's the meeting I'm looking forward to the most.
Nice. Very cool. I mean, look at us spewing out jargon like Figma for XR.
Yeah, can't do without.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be some people like, hey, look at these guys, right? Hypocrites, throwing shade at others and then rounding off this discussion by saying Figma for XR.
Mm. It's a great collaborative multiplayer prototyping software for XR.
So you mean Figma for XR? I think I'll stick with the shorter
Well, what's
one.
a shorter way of saying that? Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
nice.
All right, man.
Yeah, I think that's about as much I can stand of you on a Friday evening.
I know you're really looking forward to getting into that weekend.
Yeah.
Good. All right, man. Well, I'll get to work next week on the artwork for episode 2.
Okay.
That's another highlight of my week. And then I'll see you on Friday again.
By the way, some people asked us, you know, is there something very unique about what we're doing with this show? Like, is there something that Practical Nerds really stands for? Like, what does it represent? Any thoughts on that? I mean, have you thought that through?
I mean, you and I were Seinfeld fans, and there's the great quip in Seinfeld where they are pitching a broadcaster. Uh, which one is that? Is that CBS that they are pitching
I
in
think that you
Seinfeld?
might be right. Yeah, I think probably. Yeah.
Yeah, they're pitching a show about nothing.
Yeah.
So, that's it. Our concept is that we have no concept.
That's music to my ears, man. Love that. Love that concept.
Me too. Our preparation was zero. I hope it came through.
Uh, I guess there isn't much we can do wrong if the concept if the show is about nothing.
Good. Well, I guess we should really keep on improving on the concept and coming with more nothing.
Sounds like a plan to me.
All right, man. See you next week.
See you next week, Patrick. Cheers.
Ciao.
Bye bye.